have entered the realm of dead air. For the next 2 hours, you will be transported into the world of the strange and the supernatural. You might not feel the need to cleanse your laptops or mobile devices afterwards. But it might not be a bad idea.
What has it been like? 5 weeks since you've been here, or 10? How long have you been gone from this show?
I don't know. I'm just happy I still have a job here.
Well,
It's been a minute. Been a while.
We couldn't find anybody to replace you right away. However, Zach Bagans is in the running. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Dead Air Live on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. It is our Sunday night show, 8 p.m., and thank you guys for joining us. My name is George Lopez. With me, as always, Mr. Ken DaCosta from the wet state of Rhode Island. You guys are getting pummeled from, what was it, Ophelia, or who was it?
I don't know. It was some goddess. I'm not sure how they name these things anymore. But yeah, it's been a minute, George. Good to be back. Holding down the fort here.
First, when I went solo and had a wonderful guest co-host, Melissa St. Hilaire, we had a wonderful discussion about witches and witchcraft, and talked about a lot of different things. And then because you weren't around, unfortunately, you were busy doing more important things, such as the visit to the Conjuring House. But more importantly, and all kidding aside, you again did a fantastic job with the Ocean State Paracon, and you want to talk about it a little bit because there are so many that actually come in, our regulars that are in the chat, who actually got a chance to go and visit with you during that event. So talk about that a little bit, Ken, please. Oh, before you do that, let me forget, because Bill's in the wings. We are simulcast with KGRADB.com, KGRA on Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and the reminder bell for upcoming content. Ken, you got that bell readily handy? Or
I do right here. I'm
gonna have that. And there we go.
That's what it sounds like.
Reminder bell, guys. All right. So, Ken, how did you guys fare at the fair?
In the long run, phenomenal. A little bit different this year, 10th year, as we talked about over the weeks, the celebration of the 10th year of the release of the movie The Conjuring. And this year's event sponsored by the Conjuring House and its owner, Jacqueline Nunez. For the first time in the 10 years that we've done it outdoors at the Assembly Theater, rain was a factor.
Oh, no.
We got a bit on Saturday, and then we got a bit more on Sunday. So we were taking down tents in the pouring rain and things like that. Despite all of that, and there was just, kind of a comedy of errors. We had a food truck cancel on us, and COVID hit some of our guests and our vendors. And despite all of that, we raised the second highest amount of money that we ever have.
Whoa.
During Ocean State. Incredible. So unofficially, I take that applause on behalf of everybody who worked this.
Fantastic.
It was pretty remarkable.
Hold on, it's on loop. Let me take it off loop.
Okay. On loop. Get off loop. So I think thanks are due to, in no particular order, our vendors who were given the option if they wanted to just, bag it, said almost to a person, no, we're coming back on Sunday. And despite all this, everybody had such a good time. And it was really inspiring to see, even though we had bad weather, just to see everybody pull together and their patience and their resiliency to see this thing through. Our guests were absolutely incredible. Same thing applies to them. They just hung right in there with us. And all the people from Rise Up Paranormal, our group who volunteered their time, just did such a splendid job with the event, and did so in a great frame of mind and with a smile on their face. And that's the word that I keep coming back to. It was pretty inspiring to see everybody know that, well, it's not perfect. We're getting some rain, but yet everybody endured. And the result of that was raising a good deal of money for the Tomorrow Fund,
Fantastic.
who helps families with children with cancer. So I would say a rousing success all the way around, and so many things going on. We showed the movie in the theater Saturday, tours of the Conjuring House, ghost hunts at the Conjuring House. So everybody who played a role in this, I thank you. And on behalf of all of them, I accept that applause for each and every person that I just mentioned here.
Sure.
So it was great. And now I come
Absolutely.
back and I still have a job. I figured after the ladies came on a couple of weeks ago, and
Yeah.
I figured I was a goner. You did a
And
great job.
yeah, and we apologize, guys, that we didn't have a show last week. Things happen. That's all I can say. But at the last minute, we were, put into a position where we had to reschedule and get things done for the following week, meaning this week. The silent auction, how did that go?
Extremely well. Cody and Satori had brought a poster back from Michigan Paracon that was signed by an incredible lineup of people.
Everybody.
I mean, from A to Z, from Andrea Perrin to John Saffis. If anybody who is just about anybody in this field attends that, and they all happily and eagerly signed it for us, donated some items. The winning bid on the poster was $650.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it was at 113, the opening bid, and someone just came along and said, no, I'm owning that. So, so the auction went very well. So, the theater was great to us. We had everything we needed. So remarkable event. And, now I'm getting some sleep. So all's good.
Yeah. Starting next week, Ken will be planning for next year's event. It takes about a year.
Ouch.
But congratulations to everybody that participated in making this happen again. And there was also, from what I understand, they were going to do a side collection to get me to the Conjuring House, but you poo-pooed that and said no, we're not going to do that. So I appreciate it.
Trying to auction that off. It's tough.
Well, we're not here to go on about something like that. We have a wonderful
there was
friend.
Also a fun to keep you away, and that raised a few bucks too.
That I would not be surprised. Quite a few. Yeah. I just recently had a conversation over the phone with our good friend John Zaffis, and we got into some interesting topics with regards to demons and demonology, and we like to go back to the experts as much as we possibly can, right, Ken?
Absolutely. How is John doing?
He is enjoying a much needed rest. He is, for the most part, kind of stepping back. You and I had that conversation just recently also. You can't beat the clock. And after a while, I mean, mine was kind of a forced retirement in a sense because I have to take care of Pop, which I certainly love and don't mind because I love him. But I miss the travel. I miss the opportunities to be with so many wonderful people out there in the field. But yeah, and there's plenty of time ahead also to get that chance. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. But John's doing well. Otherwise, his wife Cheryl's doing great. The family's doing great. So he extends his hellos to you as always. So we're looking forward to that. But I'm also looking forward to speaking to our guest tonight as well. Ken, if you want to do the intros.
Absolutely. Sarah Yusuf wants to know, are paranormal investigators allowed to retire? Stay tuned for that. That's coming. We'll have the answer to that.
It's called death.
Right. All right, let's go here. Keith Johnson joins us tonight. We haven't spoken to Keith in quite a while, but Keith is one of the foremost experts in this nation on the topic of demonology. He spent over 30 years in the field, has played more than an active role in exorcisms. Keith's, as you all recall, a former cast member of Ghost Hunters, as well as a sometime on-air consultant for the show Paranormal State. He and his wife co-founded an organization called New England Anomalies Research, and it was founded for the purpose of investigating and analyzing phenomena which is suspected to be of paranormal origin. That is, removed from what is currently understood and accepted as legitimate by prevailing scientific standards. And we are going to get into a lot of aspects with him tonight, but without further ado, let's get to it. Come on in, Keith Johnson.
Hello there.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey,
George, it's been so long.
Yes.
I think the last time we had you actually on the show is when we did the haunting of Jennifer. Remember that?
Yes, that was the last time. Of course, Ken, I just saw him 2 weeks ago. So hi again, Ken.
Oh, my condolences. My condolences.
We look much younger here on streaming networks, Keith. You know, the camera adds 10 pounds. What can I say?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I may be wrong, but Keith looks like he's getting younger.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I am trying to take care of myself, and Sandra takes good care of me as well. So, they say looks can be deceiving, but I am, doing the best I can to take care of myself, and Sandra's encouragement. So that's where I am at now.
Okay, you're thinking in the paranormal field, you think everybody would be as pale as Ken, but that's not the truth.
No, it's the lighting. It's the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with that. It's Keith is the Dorian Gray of the paranormal.
Thank you. Ironically, I did play Dorian Gray when I was 17 years old.
And
never stopped. And never stopped.
Yeah.
But yeah, you look good. You look happy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I know you, yeah.
In order for us to get going with this interview tonight and talking with you, Ken and I kind of play a game of tennis, and would take turns with the discussions with our guests, as you well know. So, I want Ken to take the reins first, and then I'll jump in here in just a little bit. But so good to see you, sir.
Oh, it's good to see you. It's quite a pleasure. It's like a reunion here,
Oh,
we used to talk every week, so I've missed chatting with you. I really have, George.
Yeah.
Keith used to be the 10:30 p.m. caller.
Yes, that is correct.
On the old Dead Air show. It's like,
Exactly.
The closer. Keith was the closer on the show.
Yeah, we missed that. For those of you who've known Dead Air for the last 15 years, that was almost part of the regular weekly routine, and it was really, really a lot of fun. And there was sometimes he got in there and said, "Hey, Keith, well, that's our show."
Right.
Appreciate you guys staying with us. Take care of yourselves. But it's always an honor and a privilege, and a lot of fun always to have you. There's a lot to discuss tonight. So, Ken, I give you the first at bat, sir.
Okay, I'm going to come out swinging here at Keith. And again, you're listening to Dead Air on the Dead Air Network. Our guest tonight, demonologist, paranormal investigator, Keith Johnson. So I want to start off, Keith. I want to put something up here on the screen. Of course, this is your book series, Paranormal Realities. And we'll talk a little bit about where people can get these books and the content of them. But I put those up there and we'll circle back to them because in your books, you talk a lot about the different cases and different situations you found yourself in. And in thinking about that, I wanted to come from it from a little bit different perspective rather than what was the scariest thing, what do you feel, and maybe it's in at least one of the books, what do you feel was your most important case? Not necessarily the scariest or the toughest one, but looking back on your career, what do you think was, for whatever your reason, the most important case that you've ever been a part of?
Well, I still have to say it was the Perrin case, which is, of course, known as the Conjuring case now. But I think that was a real groundbreaker. I think that was the most important case I've done. It led to a lot of other things, and I had dealt with these situations at home, in my own home, and in the homes of good friends of mine. But this is the first time I'd come into a situation where I actually didn't know the people, although I had premonitions. I had premonitions beforehand that this was going to happen. But I would say that the Perrin case, aka the Conjuring case, was the really the most important one.
In terms of a jumping off point for you, or in terms of the assistance that you lent to them? Because, of course, your involvement, that of you and your brother, led to a whole different thing that we're all, so aware of right now.
Well, I had no idea where it was going to lead to. Really, really no idea. I could not foresee the future of it. But so I would say it was all about the family at the time. We wanted to help these people. These people had no one to turn to, no one to talk to about it without being ridiculed. So I figured we were very, very important in being there and showing the family that you're not crazy. There are people who believe you. There are other people who have experienced this. You're not hallucinating. These things are real. So I think we were actually the first to step in and show the family that not everybody will ridicule. There is help out there, and there is, very importantly, understanding. Because the main thing that happens in these kind of cases, extreme haunts, if you will, is that people feel isolated. I think there's the terror, you hear these things, people are afraid of the footsteps, they're afraid of the things that are happening, they're afraid of things invading their house. But I think one of the worst things is the isolation, the sense of isolation that nobody's going to believe them, and they feel that they're really, am I losing my mind? Am I the only one experiencing this? No one believes me. I've even gone to the church and they won't hear my story. So, where do I turn? I think a lot of people do feel like that. Friends, well-intentioned friends tell them they're imagining it. Some people even ridicule. The church sometimes is not equipped to handle this because the church is made up of people too, just like us. So not everybody is equipped to dealing with this or necessarily wants to deal with a situation like this. So I think that that's the main thing. One of the main things anyway is the sense of dread and isolation that these people are faced with.
All right. I want to put a picture up here. And this is kind of a rare photo.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell us a little bit about what and who we're looking at here.
All right. This is in around late August, early September of, well, actually, it's exactly 50 years ago, 1973. And this is the Perrin House, as it was known at the time, the Perrin Farmhouse. And this is the cellar of the Perrin Farmhouse. They're going through it. And what you see from right to left, who you see is my brother Carl, age 18 years old. And that is his, obviously they were very close at the time. That's Donna Eisenstadt, who was the chairperson of PIRO, Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization. And of course, the lovely Lorraine Warren, she had just arrived on the scene and was taking a tour of the house for the first time. And then you see Carolyn. She looks very ethereal and ghostly there. That's because of the flash cameras at the time. The flash was right in her face, and it was in a rather darkened environment. So that's why her face is washed out there. And that's one of her daughters. I believe that's Nancy next to her at the time.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. What a great picture. Harkening
Yes,
back to those days.
I'm glad they caught that there.
Yeah. Now, would you say your foray into demonology, was it a natural progression for you, or do you look upon it as a calling to you, that someone was needed to address this particular thing, and maybe you said, hey, why not me?
Well, I do believe it was a calling. I really specifically believe it was a calling. And that doesn't mean I think very highly of myself, or that I thought very highly of myself at the time. It's something I prayed about, something I felt I was meant to do. But at this time, I mean, I was a teenager, I was a young teenager. I had personal problems, as most of us do. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a lot of personal problems at that age. And I was dealing with a lot of social rejection. I had a relationship, long-term relationship that had just ended at the time. And so I really was not thinking too highly of myself at the time, but I do believe I prayed about it. I did believe at the time this is where God wanted me and this is what he wanted me to do. And so for better, for worse, I did answer that calling and went into the field, the work, as we sometimes refer to it as.
Right. And how would you explain the reason for the existence of the demonic to non-believers? Like, why is this intruding on our world?
There are creatures that do exist. I don't know if saying live is the right definition, but there are creatures who do exist in another dimension separate to our own. It's right next to our dimension. It's concordant with our dimension, and yet they have to step through the veil, so to speak, to enter the dimensional fabric of our world. To do any sort of manipulation or manifestation, they have to step through. And not everything is good there on the other side, in these dimensional pockets, so to speak. Not everything is good. There is evil. There is anti-God. There is much hate. There's anti-life, anti-birth, and anti-happiness. There's these creatures are extremely, extremely dangerous and extremely negative. And once you've been touched by them, once you've experienced them, there is really not a lot of denying it. I mean, people can deny, but still, it's always going to be there in the back of their minds that these things are a reality, and you have been approached and touched by it.
Right. And again, for the non-believers, what is their qualm with humanity? What is the purpose of their interactions with us in a negative sense? Is it envy? Is it an inevitability? How would you explain that?
Well, of course, in the Judeo-Christian belief, they are at enmity, they're at war with God and humanity, because humanity was created in God's image. However, for the non-believer, you can only describe the character of these things, and they are extremely envious, hateful. I would also say they are desperate. There's a desperation in them that seems to come through, that as much as they despise us, they want to be like us. They want to possess what we have. These are disincarnate beings, and they want to feel. They want to breathe. They want to live. They want to experience sexual euphoria. They want to experience taste, touch, the senses. Mm-hmm. But they are denied this in their present state. And for whatever reason, the state that they live in is a horrendous existence. They will do just about anything to escape it, whether it's being in a house, taking up residence in a house, and sometimes taking up residence in a person as well. Now, of course, that's not as easy as it sounds. They don't just jump into somebody for possession, but it's a kind of a brainwashing technique that can take many weeks or months, even years sometimes, to wear down somebody's resistance until they practically invite the spirit in. And they're always looking for avenues, always looking for a way to be invited in. And it's almost like a court of law. They can say, well, you invited me in, you asked for this, whether you knew what you were doing or not, you asked for this, so here I am. And sometimes it's a lot more difficult to get rid of these entities than it was to invite them in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the inhuman trying to get a part of the human experience.
Yes, that's exactly it. Exactly
So
it.
how would these entities, how do they go about choosing the location or the individuals in which to show themselves or somehow oppress the location or a particular individual? What is, for lack of a better word, Keith, what is the selection process like, and who and what do they gravitate to?
Very, very good question, Ken. Very good. They gravitate towards the path of least resistance. However, when they choose a location or a person or a family, that's very systematic. It does seem very random, but it actually a lot of systematic goes into it. They choose a place that is very hospitable to them. Perhaps there's a ley line underneath. They can feed off the energy. It's their territory. They have claimed it as their territory. They've been given permission. And this is, of course, may have happened generations and generations or even civilizations before this. They've been invited in and they live there. They've taken up residence. That's their territory. Now, say maybe several thousand years later, a tribe moves in of indigenous people. They affiliate themselves with these people as much as they can. Not that they can just take over, but they will do what they can to ingratiate themselves to these people, to these tribes. And later, of course, Europeans come in, they start building their civilizations, their houses, and of course, they take up residence there. And they look for weaknesses, they look for what's convenient, they look for anything that's hospitable to them. And that's where they take up residence, where they feel most comfortable. And they can spend years doing this, picking out which families, which residences, which territories, and which people they're going to invade and take up room with, take up their own house with.
Does lineage or genealogy ever play a role in that?
Yes.
Where,
Yeah.
in simple terms, the old family curse thing.
Yes, it can be generational. Curses or certain traits can be generational. Somebody could have promised their lineage, their children, to a certain deity, and that deity, just because one generation passes on, that doesn't mean it's going to go away. I knew a young woman who was of Puerto Rican heritage, and she was apparently had been promised generationally that she would be the ward of this certain spirit. She didn't know this till sometime later, but she started getting into Buddhism. All of a sudden, she started hearing voices. Wait a minute, you belong to me. You were promised to me. And this was really invading her bedroom at night. Every time she tried to do a Buddhist chant, it would invade her bedroom and start really talking to her. She heard this voice very loudly in her head. You belong to me. I'm not giving you up. You are mine. You were promised to me. You are my lineage. I own you. So it made life very, very difficult for her. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example.
Break down then the terms infestation, oppression, and possession for us. Because
Certainly.
we've always come to understand or be told or believe that there's a delineation among those things. And is it a case of you can't have one without the other, and that if this is allowed to progress, eventually possession is the most, overt and negative of all the things that can happen to you?
Well, that's yes, that is a very interesting progression that does happen. Infestation, that these beings, these entities are in a house or on the grounds or both. They've been there for generations. They may not be activated, only mildly activated, but this is their territory. They let it be known. And this was exactly what happened again with the Perrin family. Now, they've been existing there for years, and a lot of the families, the Arnolds, the Richardsons, the Butterworths, these spirits were part of that lifestyle, part of their lives there, whether they knew it or not. They knew something was there. All of a sudden, they move out, and suddenly the infestation starts accelerating, making itself known. As soon as the young girls come in, the 5 young daughters come in, some of them start seeing, they're not even moved yet. They start seeing apparitions, which they take to be normal people, just dressed in funny clothes.
Right.
And they called the main one Manny because it was a young man standing there. But that really accelerated things, and the infestation became more and more steady, more and more known. However, and especially in the case of the mother, because these spirits, some of them, not all of them, but some of them coveted the family situation. They coveted Carolyn's husband and her children. So then you get to the oppression stage. Now it's gone from infestation to oppression, one thing after another, to let these people know that they're not alone, and especially Carolyn in this case, that she's not alone, and she better be ready to share her family, or there's going to be trouble. And she starts receiving threats.
Letting them know that we are capable of exerting harm on you.
Exactly. We can do physical harm, and you better not resist. And a number of things, bizarre things happened to her, such as coming out of the bath and going into what they call the warm room to dry off in the wintertime. Suddenly a hanger came off of a rack, and it wasn't the plastic ones we have today. It was an old-fashioned heavy wooden one, and it started wrapping her in the head. She put her arms up, it's wrapping her arms, and then it just clatters to the floor. And incidentally, there was a family friend who was over there and happened to look upstairs when she heard the commotion, and there's poor Carolyn naked with a wooden coat hanger wrapping her on the head and beating her. That family friend never returned, understandably. And the oppression stage can, if it's unchecked, it can go on, and it gets worse and worse. Sometimes gradually it gets worse and worse, but all of a sudden there'll be a lot of threats, and you better stop resisting. If intervention is not done, the person can then be worn down. Now, there is a kind of a stage in between the oppression and possession. It's called obsession. That's when the victim, so to speak, the intended victim, starts becoming, they can think of nothing else but this spirit and the activity that's going on. It interferes with every facet of their lives. They can't even go shopping, let alone go to a church dinner or anything, or go to friends. They'll become very, very reclusive, and this thing will take over their lives. It's all they can think about. It's called the obsession stage. And of course, that, although it's relatively rare for it to go this far, that can lead to possession. Now, before the spirit actually enters, it becomes so attached to this person, the person actually has an attachment, that it will follow this person. Even if they leave the house, it'll follow this person around, because now it's got a hold on that person's psyche, and it's working its way in. It's like a termite just working its way in, boring its way into that person's psyche. Although it is a very psychological routine, it will bore its way into that person's personality. And then the last stage is possession, which can lead to all sorts of terrible tragedies, of course.
Yeah. And I want to ask you too, like, is it frustrating? Because let's give you a hypothetical for a moment, that the Perrin situation happens in the year 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Let's fast forward a few decades.
Yes.
And they begin to do what you and I see a lot of people doing now, self-diagnosing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Where you might get contacted by someone before there is even an assessment on your part who claims or states that they believe something demonic
Mm-hmm.
is in their home.
Yes.
And of course, the first question is, well, what makes you think that?
Right.
But this is kind of like a slippery slope. When people self-diagnose themselves, my first question is, if they believe that's the case, do things become more chaotic? And the second part, the subset of that question is, can they, because they feel this way, unintentionally sort of invite this because they're starting to believe in it, and that's the case? And a lot of this comes from, television, movies, popular culture.
Yes.
A lot of this, I would say, it's a preponderance of it comes from social media, so forth. So when people do self-diagnose themselves, convinced there's something, does that make your job a little bit harder because they become, to a degree, agents of chaos?
Yes, that's very well said. Very well put, Ken. Sometimes they do get so caught up in this that, say, if it were today, they might have already been exposed to so much media about this, and there's just so much information, but it's not obviously necessarily true or good information or good advice. I mean, we're always getting advice. All we have to do is go on the internet. We're barraged with all this advice, medical over-the-counter advice, like you said, self-diagnosis. So some people will self-diagnose, and I'm sure you see this too, Ken. And by the way, I want to say that your approach with Rise Up, it's just such a wonderful approach that you take, because you come in not assuming, or at least keeping it to yourself, and just interview and just experience without being judgmental at all. You just come in and very, very polite to everyone, including whatever entities may or may not be present. So I love the way you handled that.
I appreciate that.
Sure. But some people, I personally, I avoid using the D word. If the person, the client themselves, wants to use it, that's fine. But I don't immediately come in, even if I suspect it may be demonic. I don't use that word. If I have to describe the negative activity, I'll start out by saying it's a contrary spirit. Things are going counterclockwise, and things are like topsy-turvy. So I kind of say it like that. It's kind of contrary. Things going backwards. They're going against the grain, against the laws of physics, so to speak. So not to sound like Scotty, but these things are very, very antagonistic. And I'll use words like that. Maybe the antagonistic is a little bit too strong, but I kind of ease my way into a situation like that, and unless, of course, you come in and things are flying off the wall and everything like that, which is
Right.
very almost never will happen. Even if things have been flying off the wall, we'll come in, it'll all stop, of course.
Yeah,
as soon as
we have a whole new set of problems at that point.
Exactly.
Keith, before I go here for a little bit, I want to bring George in, but I want to close on a question in terms of that. Now, you and I both know, and a lot of us who delve into this and study this understand that exorcisms aren't handed out like candy.
Right.
There's a process for this, and many times the medical and psychological fields become involved in this because you want to eliminate the possibility of a psychosis or a mental illness or something like that. So you don't falsely become an enabler, even with all good intentions. But do you think, or do you have reason to believe, or maybe there's an example, that some medical diagnoses are incorrect and there is, in fact, such a thing as spiritual possessions?
I do believe that. Yes, I do believe that. I do believe that. I mean, of course, the medical explanation should be thoroughly investigated, and they should be investigated first, actually. But I've had so many people say, Sandra and I, in fact, this really bothers Sandra. She said that's a red flag when somebody comes in saying, I need an exorcism, because then we have to start, well, why do you think you need, and go, but
Right.
yeah, medical diagnosis is very, very important, but there is a time. There is definitely a time when it crosses over that, and it's not really a medical problem, and it's not necessarily merely a psychological problem. It is also a spiritual problem, and that can make things very, very difficult for the medical teams to diagnose, obviously, because they can't set foot in something like that. But yes, sometimes it is truly and mainly a spiritual problem, and it has to be dealt with accordingly. And of course, that is a process in itself. You've got steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. You have to contact church authorities. You have to, and church authorities, if they're worth their weight in salt, so to speak, they will concur with the psychological diagnosis. They will do anything they can to exhaust that too. Make sure the person has been thoroughly psychologically evaluated, that's the steps in Catholicism that they're required. They're required by church law to take. And they have their own set of clergy and professionals that will handle that. And it is time consuming, but it is necessary. It's necessary to take these steps.
Right.
And then you can deal totally with the spiritual.
Right. I mean, and there are such thing as medical and psychological misdiagnosis.
Certainly.
And if you come from a certain perspective where you don't believe in any of this anyway, then I think that bias might seep through a bit in whatever your diagnosis is. Now, I don't think I'll speak for. I think I'm speaking for you, Keith. We're not advocating pay no attention to science.
Right.
We're not saying that, but nothing is infallible, scientific or not. So
true.
There has to be many different lenses that you look through before making any kind of declaration about this. And I think with that, I'm going to get out of the way a little bit and bring George back in here and let you guys catch up. But as they say, I shall return. George.
Thank you very much, Ken. Again, welcome, Keith Johnson, our very dear friend, returning to Dead Air after a long hiatus, but we're so happy to have him back. And I am going to, sorry for the particular wordage, play devil's advocate for a minute. Whether it was Jennifer's case, which you were kind enough to bring your input into, or my case, which you've either heard third party or were happen to be part of any of the discussions that I've had in the past where I've dealt with extended oppression still going on. Keith, I think in these terms of those people who are easily subjective to suggestion. And an example of that, you've seen videos that are out there. A lot of them are out there on social media right now, where a hypnotist has somebody on stage and they're telling that person go to sleep. And then 2 or 3 people in the audience, those audience viewers are nodding off also. That there are some people who are more susceptible to suggestion than others. And the reason I'm using that particular example is with regards to any type of oppression. And when I tell the experiences to Ken, a lot of times I think what he's trying to do is bring me back down to the earth and kind of diffuse it. He doesn't go, oh my God, let's get a hold of Keith Johnson. But he's like, well, you got to consider, you might have this. And it really comes down to these night terrors that I get, still continuing, violent, brutal, disturbing. And there's this sense, and I bring this up to Ken many a time, is when I have these, there is a presence. There's no other way to explain it. But in that dream, once I am coming from a normal dream and this invasion occurs, there's a presence that comes with it, and it is visceral. You know that it's present in there, and that's when I wake up in the middle of that. But to this day, I have not surrendered, acquiesced to these suggestions, to these forces. But there are many who may not. Is that important to tell the audience, the listeners, the viewers who may be wondering, there is something that's going on? I'm feeling oppressed. And again, oppression could come in many different forms, and it's not necessarily about the religious oppression, but you could be dealing with isolations at home. You don't have that bond with a whole bunch of people. I can count my friends on one hand. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play with each individual that may be under attack. But are there sage words from Keith Johnson for those people who are easily influenced to something like this, where they immediately start surrendering? How do you avoid that? Because my thought is, if it ever went from night terrors, Keith, to actual appearance, visual appearances, anything like that in my conscious life, I'm going to fight right off the bat. I'm going to, I love you. I'll say, the worst things I possibly can to say this isn't going to work with me. But others out there almost have this surrender mentality. Is there a way to fight back?
There is a way to fight back, and it may not be easy for somebody who's so easily suggestible. But then again, of course, you get with the isolation. When somebody is very isolated, that makes it very, very difficult. But sometimes it just takes a caring friend to want, and they may not have a lot of knowledge about these things, but just a caring friend to just come in and say, well, tell me what you're feeling. Just share it with me. They might not have the advice. Just share it with me. I want to know. I'm very interested to know. What I don't understand, I want you to help me understand. Please tell me what you're going through. That's the step over. That's the one of the most important things that can happen. That you trust somebody, and you can tell that somebody really sincerely wants to help. And of course, you might suggest psychotherapy, or just regular somebody who's a counselor or trained in this can just listen to your story and what you're feeling. And that can lead to more help, better steps. People who understand you might need this as well, and you might need another step. But that first step, just to open up to somebody and be able to trust somebody. And that's why it really bothers me when somebody has a problem like this, and it may not be a real spiritual problem, but so many people are just so ready to just dismiss it. You're reading too many horror books, you're seeing too many movies, you're watching too many TV shows, and it's just your imagination. Your imagination's going on. Some people just need a helping hand, somebody to understand and just listen to them. And even before I was well known in this field, and this happens today, if somebody doesn't know who I am, I will have people approach me, and they'll just start talking to me. They'll start talking to me about this. A phlebotomist recently at the hospital. I was just having a routine blood test last week, a week before last, and he started telling me about the Euphrates River drying up just in conversation. And he said, there's supposed to be fallen angels there. And he just started into this, and he was very, very interested. He had no idea who I was, but I left him one of my cards, of course. But it was just interesting that he would approach me and start talking to me. I've had people long before I was known as a demonologist or even an investigator into the paranormal. I've had people come up to me, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but I had a dream. I have to talk to you about it. And I have been able to help people that way. Not always, unfortunately. Some people they disappear, but a lot of times I have been able to help people just because they felt they needed somebody to talk to and somebody to listen to them. And then if they want, I can give advice.
But these are the cases even if it's just a conversational situation that comes about. But you can consider it a case where someone is having some issues and they're at least airing it out with an individual, whether it be you, whether it be a friend.
Mhm.
What do you do? How do you even contend with those other? You take an issue like Jim Jones
Oh yeah.
tragedy, and all of these followers all agreed to ingest this poison and die.
Yes.
Power of suggestion. Now
Oh
you
yeah.
take
Terrible.
a multidimensional entity that is
Mhm.
influencing someone. It's got to be a breeze when it comes to particular targets. When a certain victims that are out there and just subjugate immediately. Do you? Are there any signs? Is there any way that those people can be, other than the fact that they do the research themselves, they happen to come to a channel like this and listen to you, how they can get from under that hypnosis and that influence? Or is it just, hey, it's something that they're going to have to contend with because they're not reaching out?
Mhm. Well, it's like cessation of smoking. You can be hypnotized, you can do this and that to stop, but the hypnosis, the suggestion is only going to be as powerful as you want it to be. If you don't accept it, it's not going to help. You can have all the therapy you want to quit smoking, but there has to be a time when, well, I'm going to try this because I really, it's not going to be easy, but I really do want to quit smoking for my health. I can't afford it. It comes to that. Unless you really decide that, make that conscious step that you are going to try to quit smoking or try to any other habit, destructive habit, toxic habit, even relationships. You've got to be willing to take that
Yes.
first step to do that. And it's just, and by the grace of God, sometimes there'll be the right person there to listen. There's been times where, when you're open, you spend some time in prayer, just, open prayer. It doesn't have to be out loud, but I was in a school cafeteria, and when I was going to college, and I sat at a table because I realized I should sit at this table. And I got the feeling this young woman is having an oppression, demonic oppression, and I have to listen to her. But we sat down, and she just did a double take and started including me in the conversation. We all became friends, have friendly. And then came the time where she said, Keith, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I just have to tell you about a situation my boyfriend and I are having. There's this woman that lives in our apartment and, lives next to our apartment. And I think she was the landlady. She started doing some very, very bizarre things, just shouting at them and calling them names. And she hung up the clothes out in the yard. They turned around. A second later, they're gone. Turn around again, they're back. Just really, really bizarre things. And she's staring at them, giving them the evil eye, so to speak. And I said, does she ever refer to you as pigs? And she looked at, yes, she does. She calls us pigs all the time. Well, I think, and I just gave her my opinion. And I said, I do understand, and I do believe you. If you want me to come over and pray over the situation, I will. But I'm, at home, I'm going to pray over this. And they came home and they prayed. They surrounded themselves with white light. They prayed for protection in different scriptures I'd given them. And that woman just stopped. I don't think they saw her much of her after that. She just stopped her bizarre behavior immediately. Of course, that's not always as easy as that, but that is just one success story, I think. And another time I was in a church, my relationship had just ended with a long term, and I was praying that somebody else. I was listening to an organ recital, praying that I be sent to somebody who needs my help. And all of a sudden, I heard this laughter at the back of the church, and it was a big, like, cathedral. It was echoing laughter, hysterical laughter, and then it broke into sobbing. And I came over and to this young man, and I said, "Excuse me," and I was younger than him at the time. I said, "Do you need help? Can I help you?" And oh, yes, I just need somebody to talk to. And he took my hand, and we talked for a while. He just cheered right up. It turned out that his situation was he had some things he wanted to know if he should have a yard sale or donate them to the church. It wasn't a traumatic situation, But this young man was incredibly intelligent. And because of the pressure, his schooling of being so intelligent, he'd had a breakdown. It's like almost like the savant situation. He just had all this pent up emotion, like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He just had all this inside of him, and he needed somebody to talk to. And that just brightened his day. I said, well, do you feel led to donate to this church? Yes, I do. Then do so. And he did, and he felt totally better. Not a traumatic situation, but I believe I was put there at the right time.
60 seconds before we go to break, Keith. The fragmented society that we live in now, it's just so polarized. And
yes.
There is, again, the contention levels are at the highest that in my lifetime that I've ever seen, socially, politically, whatever it may be. Is that a great breeding ground for these negative forces?
Yes. Society, the way a lot of aspects of society today is a breeding ground for all sorts of psychosis as well. It's almost like, to the point where if you don't have some kind of mental problem or emotional problem, what's wrong with you? You're not paying attention to the world around you. Very,
right.
Very different. There's just so much media being thrown at us constantly. And I get addicted to going on Facebook. What's everybody doing? And then you see one thing after another. And before I know it, I'm spending hours when I should be doing something else. But it just so much is thrown at us. So really, to have a prayerful or at least private, serene time. And Sandra's been listening to this melodic tones and music lately, where people what do you call it? The bowls, where you put the, you get the wand almost, and you put the bowl around, you make that it's just so relaxing. And she'll listen to this hour after hour, and it just calms her right down. She doesn't even have to be actively praying. It's just this in the background. It just soothes her. It's very, very effective.
I gotta ask Ken, do you see that orb behind Keith like I do?
I do. It's the
blue spinning orb.
Keith is the Lord of the Rings.
Well, before we go with that, we do
no more orb.
we have to get to break here. When we come back on the other side, more questions with a very special guest, Keith Johnson. Some announcements coming your way. Also, you're watching Dead or Live on the Dead or Full Spectrum channel. Stay with us, guys. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
As UFO reports come in from around the world, the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, is there. We continue to explore new cases and build our massive database. We share our information with the world in a number of ways. If you would like to be part of our investigative team, you are always welcome. What could be more exciting than exploring the UFO question firsthand? Join MUFON, find your friends.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy.
I'm taking for the play. I'm gonna take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Welcome back to our show, ladies and gentlemen. A very special guest joining us here in a second. Again, Mr. Keith Johnson. We are talking about all things demons as we leap into the holiday time frame, and holiday being Halloween. So mostly during the month of October, we'll stay with the ghosts and the ghouls and the scary stuff that you might even be experiencing in your home. And then we'll get back to UFOs and Bigfoot and other things once we get into the November time frame. But we have a couple of announcements to make, and the answer to your question was both, Ken. I know you asked me a question, but let's hit them both right now at the top of the second hour before we bring our guests back in. So I turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, we just want to announce a couple of brand new shows on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. One is called Secrets of the Craft, which will be premiering Friday, October 13th. Go figure. And it stars our great friend, Melissa. I'm sorry.
Melissa St. Hilaire.
I'll get there. Melissa St. Hilaire, the American Witch. And she is going to take us through the greater Los Angeles area, introducing some of her friends and practitioners of the craft. And let's just play you a little snippet of what you can expect from Secrets of the Craft.
Any secrets about your craft that you'd like to share?
No. That's why they're secrets. So a lot of my practice is actually just doing arts and crafts. And just it's really just doing arts and crafts and learning how to do the things so that when the time comes and I need to, and there's urgency.
Do you consider yourself a witch?
Yes, of course, I do.
And you have a home recording studio. Did you set up your space with your practice in mind?
Yes. So it's actually pretty interesting, and sometimes it drives me crazy. So half of my studio is like all music equipment, pianos, synths, stuff like that, and then the other half is altars.
They see this word, and that's all they see. And being a psychic is so much more.
Are witches real? Could you live next door to one? Do they have supernatural powers? Can anyone be a witch? My name is Melissa St. Hilaire, and I'm a professional witch. Join me as I introduce you to my fellow practitioners when we ask them to reveal their secrets of the craft.
All right, so mark your calendars. That's Friday, October 13th. The first episode is from the Green Man store in North Hollywood, California. And there will probably be 6 episodes in all. And we have been looking forward to this, George, for almost a year now. And Melissa and Jackie have just done a phenomenal job on the cinematography and the direction of this, and I can't wait to share it with everybody.
Yeah. But wait, there's more.
But there's more. Rise Up Paranormal's head of research, Chris Blanchett, has also decided to dip his toe into the YouTube waters, coming from his wheelhouse, which is cultural and civic preservation, which is what he went to school for. So he has put together a show called the Paranormal Preservationist, where he is going to combine historical research and historical preservation with the paranormal, and we're really excited about this. The first show is up, and the episode is called Hopes and Dreams, and it's something that hits very, very close to Chris and his family in a very personal way. But here's a look at the Paranormal Preservationist.
Hi, my name is Chris, and I am the Paranormal Preservationist. My background is in historic preservation and public history. I am a researcher and a paranormal investigator. In these episodes, you will hear stories of historical research, the paranormal, and be faced with questions like the one I hope to answer in today's episode. What role do paranormal investigators have in keeping historic narratives alive, and more importantly, factual?
You guys got a lot coming your way here on Dead Air.
A little bit. And I want to, just as a disclaimer for everybody, the Paranormal Preservationist, we are going to say viewer discretion is advised with some of these episodes, as they will cover everything from true crime to maybe something a little bit more humorous. But you know, some of the stories are heart-rendering and some are quite shocking. But we're going to edit it in a way that is palatable. But viewer discretion is advised, and of course that will be up the beginning of every show, just so you know. But we're very excited about this as the universe kind of grows for us a little bit, and we welcome some of our friends in who have a certain perspective that we think is worth sharing with you on not just a limited basis for an interview show, but really let you know what they're all about. So, and there'll probably be more to come. So
hit that subscribe button.
You better.
So you guys know everything that's going on, and you never know what you're going to get week to week. And with the Halloween time frame coming up, we may have specials coming your way. You just never know. Sure. And of course, every other Thursday we have this one guy, and Elise. I know Elise, but who's the other guy, Ken?
Johnson something or other.
Johnson, yeah. What the hell is that? I have no idea.
Oh, ask his brother. Hey.
He knows. Hey. Very special guest, Keith Johnson. And yeah, Carl Johnson is on every other Thursday, Paranormal Perspective, with at least Gianmarco. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
So we look forward to all of our content and the upcoming content as well. Make sure, again, you guys hit that reminder bell. Click on the like button, because we got quite a few already. Some 9 people have already hit the like. Thank you so much for that. And also the reminder bell that Ken was just dingling there. What movies scare Keith Johnson, whether it's recent or back in the day?
Back in the day, of course, The Exorcist, first time I saw it, you weren't expecting
Thank
weren't
you.
expecting everything that was going to happen.
No.
My mom did, because she's already read the book, but she didn't tell me what was going to happen. But yeah, that scared me when it first came out. There's things that are more of a psychological thing. Like when I was very, very young, it was like The Haunting of Hill House. Some reason that kind
Yes.
of that kind of I didn't really want to sleep that night. That kind of got to me, And now it's not so much things that scare me, but things that enthrall me. Sometimes I get very enthralled, especially when they're true to life. And by the way, as most of us know, The Exorcist is loosely based on an actual story, an actual case that did happen in 1949. But the story itself is very, very insightful. And although it is basically a fictional story, there is a lot of reality. There are things you can learn from it. I mean, you're not really going to see somebody's head turning around 360 degrees. And yet the premise of that is that it's supposed to be something that is psychokinesis. It's psychokinesis. It's actually projecting an image that it wants people to see, and some people who are susceptible will see it. So that's the premise of that. But movies like that have quite more than a hint of truth to them. They I wouldn't say they scare me, but they do get to me, and especially if I feel there's a message there, and I want to know if I can possibly convey that to others in some way.
Is George Lopez on your TV behind you?
Yes, it is. That's a picture. I don't know if that's a picture I brought up. Now
looks like Dr. Evil.
This is that's from
Sandra. Yes, at the Ocean State
from some
Paragon.
reason-
He's
That's from 8
holding
years ago.
Sandra hostage for $1 million.
Yes, that's from a past Ocean State Paracon convention at the Assembly Theater, and Sandra has just said the notorious George Lopez, and that's why he's posed like that. But I had brought that up. I thought you might want to see it. That's from I think 2015. So that shows that Ocean State Paracon has been going on for quite some years, and it just keeps getting more successful every year.
I look like a cult leader over there. Oh my God.
You do.
Is there?
Oh, take it away. Take it away.
Is there a case you're working on, a case you've heard of, a historical case? Now, mind you, Hollywood is Hollywood, so they could take somebody who stubbed their toe and turn it into a 2-hour movie.
Right.
Based on a true story, let's go with this. But if you were to think of one that really hasn't received the recognition it deserves, what limitations that you can talk about, is there one out there that comes to mind? It's like, wow, this has to be made into a movie. The story must be told.
That was a case that when I was in the Atlantic Paranormal Society TAPS, that was a case when we were in Skowhegan, Maine, and we were snowed in for the weekend. So we weren't going anywhere, even if we wanted to leave. But we spent a weekend taking care of that case and did get quite a lot of fun out. In fact, I wrote about that in my first Paranormal Realities book. Just the detail of that, how things that happen progressively. I think that too. And also there's a case that I've been working on it for quite a few years, and they're actually friends of mine that live in Kentucky, and they've been going through oppression for years and years and years. And I know their story intimately. They share it, and they say they are very ready to go public about it. They said, because keeping it to ourselves has just been causing more and more problems. And they came out with it in their local church, and they subsequently had to leave that church because of the feedback they received. But because of what's been happening for so many years, they are ready to go public with it. So they live in Kentucky, and that's generational. It's actually a good example of generational, and it's nothing that's their fault. It's not that they conjured something and asked this to happen, but previous generation started this and promised family members throughout throughout their genealogical lineage that we would we owe them. So it has been passed on through no fault of their own. And I feel very, very bad for them. And someday I'm going to get out there to Kentucky and do what I can in person to help them. But I have been, over the phone with them for many years and praying for them. And they've been through like a lot more than they deserve. And I think that would make a very good theatrical presentation as well. You wouldn't even need to exaggerate it, as it is. It's extremely interesting, and my heart goes out to these people because they are good friends of mine.
Let's talk a little bit about your career as an investigator, where maybe the shoe's on the other foot. You are asked to come in and investigate what we would call a typical haunting, if there is such a thing. Mm-hmm. Nothing demonic attached to it. You're just coming in with the usual shadow figures, electronics going haywire, sounds, voices, what we would call the typical haunting. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in that situation where upon your investigation, you actually became concerned for them because you thought, by your assessment, there might be something negative there, mm-hmm. when you came in under an entirely different premise?
That has happened. That has happened, actually. There was a family, and like this is just it's happened more than once, but this just for example, there was a family that they were convinced that they were haunted. A very, very down-to-earth family, though. They weren't into any kind of conjuration or anything like that. Never touched any kind of spirit board or anything like that. But it happened to be because they moved into this place. They were having this phenomena. From the things they told me, I suspected it was more than just a typical haunting. I didn't think it was a human haunting. I thought it was something little heavier than that, a lot heavier. But I didn't want to tell them this because they weren't open to me saying that. So I wasn't going to frighten them. They were frightened enough as it was. But what I did, I went along with a house blessing, and I used scripture, of course, and everything, but I worded it, not as anything inhuman. In fact, I said a prayer for the deceased. I said a prayer for the deceased in Latin, and I did ask for a sign of departure. And then afterwards, we were sitting down and just sitting down talking about what to expect. And all of a sudden, we heard this boom, right, in one of the cupboards over our shoulder. And the husband he looked around like that. But I just kept talking calmly. And after a while, he seemed to forget about it. And I took that as the sign of departure. And I stayed friends with them. I was actually able to arrange for their daughter to have her baptism in Texas. I contacted clergy out there and made the arrangements and everything. So we did have they moved away shortly afterwards, but we did have a good relationship because of that. And, it went on to more positive things that had nothing to do with the haunting. So, yeah, that's an example of what you just mentioned.
Right. And I mean, that must be kind of I want to say awkward, but you alluded to it where, I've always thought that it's easier to go from nothing to an explanation of the supernatural, mm-hmm. than it is to start with the premise of the supernatural, right, and talk people down.
Right, exactly.
But I'm not sure when you get into that realm if it's as easy as I think it is, because maybe they've accepted the fact that their house is a little active and a little weird, and then suddenly you got to make that jump to warp speed and say, well, the good news is I don't think you have your regular everyday ghost, but the bad news is you may have something a bit more profound.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I would hate to have to tell people that if they're not ready for it. Sometimes they start talking to me. I think I have a demon. I think I have this. I think I have that. And then, like you said, is sometimes talking them down, or, dealing with the situation. Let's not jump to this right away. But some people, it does start from the bottom and go up. A lot of times from the top down, but like you said,
Yeah, right. But that puts a lot of pressure on you, because you have to act. I mean, you've got to have the strength of your convictions when you sit them down and say, look, I believe that there may be something here that's a little darker. Um, it's a little pressure on you, because when you make that decision, we need to have a talk. You have to understand where you're going to go with them,
Exactly. You have to try to at least understand if they're ready to accept something like that, at least open to the possibility. And, if not, I could, counsel them in certain ways, and perhaps even suggest somebody come in that they might feel more comfortable with, be it like a shaman or whatever that, will of course deal with the process of dispelling negative energy and introducing positive, which is what we try to do, but in a way that they might be more conducive to accept it. We, of course, as you know, Sandra and I normally do a Christian blessing, but we were called into a Massachusetts residence once by a woman who was actually Wiccan, and she was, of course, pagan. But I explained to her, we usually do a Christian blessing. She said, well, do your blessing, I hope it helps. And there was something very negative there, because she mentioned a certain name of a person who had committed suicide, not in the house, but he had lived there. I immediately began feeling very nauseous, and I was hoping I wouldn't have to run to the bathroom. I didn't want to tell the family I was feeling that. Later on, Sandra told me, when they mentioned that name, I just felt like I was going to throw up. I almost had to run to the bathroom, but I didn't want to say anything. So we both felt that at the same time without telling each other. But I did do the Christian blessing. However, I worded it in words that would be very, very conducive to the homeowner. I talked about rebirth, a rebirth of springtime, of life-giving, of birth, of bringing new life into the world. And there was a distasteful smell in the basement. Her basement, which was next to her garage, was very, very, smelled like something like decaying flowers or vegetation. All of a sudden, after the blessing, it just smelled like roses. It smelled very sweet and fragrant. So that was very, very conducive to her, and she felt very, very much at ease. And we didn't hear from her again. I think that did help her solve her problem and help her deal with this.
Right. Now, Keith, we know that exorcisms are very rare things.
Yes.
But do they happen more than we think they do? And I'm not sure if you're aware globally as to what goes on all over the world, but do you think that they happen more than, for instance, I might think they do?
I think they do happen much more frequently than the general public suspects. Of course, with Catholicism, there is a lot. Of course, they go on much, much more. It's not that they're common, but they go on much more frequently than the public is led to believe. It's very, very clandestine, very, very hidden. But yes, they do, as a necessary step. Exorcisms do take place, I would say, well, across the country and all over the world, all the time. All the time, there's always something like that going on. And that's just in our culture and in Catholicism. There are certainly other cultures that this is just a regular practice for them, where they have to deal with this over and over. And so a lot of exorcisms are taking place, and they do take place. I don't like to be the one that has to perform them. I would be more than happy to assist with one, to assist a member of the clergy in one. There have been times where I've had to, this was just this situation. I was at hand and I had to do it. And fortunately, I had one that was a very, very successful, a couple that were very, very successful, where it was impromptu. I didn't know I was going to be performing an exorcism, but it just happened. It just fit into place, and it was successful, fortunately. But, years ago, I'm back when about like 35, 40 years ago, my brother and I were on a case where we were holding the person down. It was a teenager, and with incredible strength, we were being thrown around, bruised up, and that's we were still in our 20s then. I would not not want to be doing that now, but
No.
I leave that to somebody else, but I'll be happy to assist.
I'm going to ask a question for a friend. Let's call him Ken, who may think a lot of the idea of demons in many cases is a human construct to explain the presence of evil, or to set guidelines and parables that people can follow behaviorally. Okay, what would you say to my unnamed friend Ken, who thinks that a lot of this is maybe based on literature and things were poached from things like Dante's Inferno or John, Paradise Lost, John Milton, where that's sort of been adopted, or even some other cultures, some other mythologies, Egyptian, Greek, Norse mythology, where some of this has been lifted from their dogma, from their writings, and adopted by Christianity, Catholicism. Straighten me out on that, Keith.
Actually, a lot of it has been influenced by literature over the years, such as Dante's Inferno, Milton's Paradise Lost. A lot of it does come from different culture and even the modern media. A lot of it does. But I mean, I am convinced that there is a realm that is outside of us that is purely evil, that is demonic, that is separate from us. And I don't think if somebody was totally convinced that it's just our way of explaining things, that you could convince that person. But I mean, I truly believe that is outside of us. And it's not that common that it's just going to flare up and you're going to get proof of it and everything. But again, there's in The Exorcist, there's the character of Father Damien Karras, who has lost his faith and is a trained psychiatrist, and he just will not believe that this could be anything other than something that's of the subconscious, or it's something that's influenced the people, why they believe that the daughter is under possession. There's nothing for some time that will convince him that this is a reality, even to the point of coming to his bishop and asking for an exorcism, but declaring he personally does not think it's genuine. He does not think it's genuine, but he wants to do it for like a psychological effect. But I just know that when I was in the parent house and I was still a teenager and had those girls there that were just the young sisters who were just so frightened, and they were huddling together, and you could feel it building up. They asked, I asked them, do they have any religious beliefs? They said, oh, yes, we're Catholic. And I had asked them, well, why don't you try calling upon Jesus? And there was that window, of course, the story that Roger Perrin had even tried hammering it shut. It's just the wood was so swollen from the August humidity, it wouldn't shut. Suddenly, as soon as anyone said the name of Jesus, that slammed down. Nancy Perrin was slapped. You could see her hair go up, slapped on the left side of the head, screaming and crying. And I truly believe that there was a separate entity that had manifested in that room. It was all very quick, but I just kept praying, and I got so angry. It was a frightening situation, but I got so angry that these girls were being harassed and picked on. I just called upon the name of Jesus. I said, it's more afraid of the name of Jesus than you are of it. And it left the room. It didn't leave the house, of course, but it left the room. Just everything was suddenly peaceful. They all looked up and said, it's gone. It's gone. I do believe I was dealing with an otherworldly entity, and I've come across situations like that over the years multiple times. Most of the time, no. Most of the time, in the many houses and people I've dealt with, most of the time, no, not to that extent.
Sure.
But I have dealt with it enough times to know that it is a reality. And even before it was proven to me, I believed it was a reality. But if I needed any proof, those situations would be the proof.
Carl, with regards to the parent case or any of the other cases out there where prayer seems to work, can there be, and of course anything is, can be put into a hypothetical situation, but if in fact what you're dealing with may not be demonic, but may be poltergeist activity, and the person who is projecting this energy has a religious background, those prayers could subdue the activity of that person for that time being. Case in point, with the parent family, again, they used to go to church and then the church shunned them, but they still had Jesus in their heart, God in their heart. And so if a poltergeist activity was going on at a particular location, the priest or the exorcist, who are one and the same and should be, perform specific prayers. Can that also mimic that it's a demon leaving the room or leaving the location, one or the other, for a time being, because the person who is projecting this poltergeist believes in it?
I think that's a possibility, yes. But I also see God's hand in that. If that alleviates the situation and the situation is rectified and these people are restored and they are at peace and they are happy and healthy, and I think that God is used that way to
it's a win-win.
Hmm?
It's a win-win.
Yes, a win-win, exactly. A win-win situation. That's exactly what I would call it. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, how do, in the case of the parents or anyone else that you visited, how does a negative entity achieve the right to intrude on humans? I want to go back to how that starts, because we talk a lot about Ouija boards, the dark arts, and all the rest of that thing. But there are other ways, maybe just living in a bad marriage or living in squalor or, just this general negativity that may be an invitation. But are all of those things in play when someone is actually visited and imposed upon by something negative?
Sometimes the person experiencing this can be totally innocent. They've had little or no interest in the actual occult. Sometimes they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But for some reason, this is very mysterious. If a person who is demonized or has a strong attachment to a negative entity happens to die in a location, for some reason, that seems to give the spirit permission to dwell and stay in that house. It's got a legal right to be there because that person had this attachment and did live there. Just because that person died, often the spirit still has a legal right to be there. It's very mysterious, but unless that spirit is coerced or that legal right is deposed, is negated, then that spirit will continue to be there and will sometimes latch on to somebody for its own amusement, or it may be using that person as sustenance, feeding off that person.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Carl, but could it also be because there's a certain vulnerability with whoever's left and who may be going through a stage of grief?
Oh, yes, that could be very well. In fact, there is a book, know if I have it on hand. Just one second. I think I've got it right here.
Sure.
And thank God my picture is off of the TV finally.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, just shut that off. It won't come back.
Back to the rings.
There's a book. It's out of print now. It's by Robert W. Pelton, called The Devil and Karen Kingston. It's a true story. It's based on a true story of a young girl who was she had severe mental retardation, was unable to speak, nonverbal, incredibly learning disabled, quite a multitude of physical ailments. But supposedly somebody had found out or suspected she may be possessed. And it is a true story that happened in the early 1970s. The names have been changed, but it's called The Devil and Karen Kingston. And here's a picture of the Devil and Karen Kingston. Now, my son, when he was little, he took his stickers and put them all over all over the book, but decorated it. But that's the book, The Devil and Karen Kingston. Now, it's a very rare phenomena, but what happened, they traced back to how, yes, that is it. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you very much. What happened is when this girl was very young, about 6 years old, her father had been a terrible alcoholic and was abusing the mother. Finally, the mother had stabbed him, which resulted in a fatality. He had so many demonic entities in him, they just took the path of least resistance. And this girl, a special needs girl, was traumatized at seeing this, and they just leapt right into her. They leapt right into her, and that's what caused her state of possession. That's very rare. How can an innocent child, how can God allow this to happen? But in the course of time, she was delivered. There was an exorcism, and it was not a Catholic exorcism either, but it was a more of a non-denominational Christian exorcism. But the demons were cast out, and there were several very, very intelligent demons. And some of the conversation is very, very telling, very, very interesting with these demons and what they will do to not be expelled and how they will fight, because usually there is a gatekeeper. There's a dominant spirit, which will be the gatekeeper, and that spirit decides who comes and goes. That spirit will usually be the last one to leave, if possible, because it's the most powerful one. But these spirits are doing anything not to. One of them was weaker, so it didn't fight as much, but one of these spirits started telling all these fantastic things. Do you know, I once... I was in the Bible. I'm in the Bible. I possessed the woman in the well. I was in her. And Jesus came, and that's why I left her. And I was in Jack the Ripper. I was in Bonnie Parker and a Bonnie and Clyde fame. It's all these things, these fascinating stories, which are probably not true, but it was the delay check. I'll tell you another story if you don't cast me out. And just the way the different demons fought. One was a mute spirit. It couldn't speak. One never learned to write. But very, very interesting in the study of demonology and deliverance deliverance from evil spirits. So I would highly recommend that if somebody can get a copy of that. It's just very, very telling. I found it very fascinating. I read it when I was probably in my very late teens or early 20s. And The Devil and Karen Kingston. It's an assumed name, but it is. They do have pictures in the book from the actual exorcism. So and they have samples of the writing and everything. There's the girl when she's being prayed over.
Oh yeah.
There's another picture of her. They've got a bucket underneath her and a pan underneath her. She's just throwing up copious amounts of this strange substance that looked like spaghetti. But it is interesting how these different demons approached, and they're very, very individual writing. And even though this girl could not write at the time, all the writings, they analyzed the writings. They had graphologists involved and everything. She did grow up to live a normal life. She caught up with her schooling once she was delivered from the demons, and did go on to, according to the book, go on to live a very normal life. She was totally cured.
Yeah, fascinating story. Have to look that up.
Yes.
We've got a lot of questions for you tonight, Keith.
Lots.
And Q right now. So we're going to get to Qua right now, Q&A, before we get out of here tonight. So maybe we can address some of these. First one comes from ERRT Radio. That's our buddy Ron in Minnesota. How you doing, Ron? Do you think the demon entities are given tasks to complete to hope they get a better deal than what they have?
Given tasks to complete to hope they get a better deal than what they have. Well, sometimes
is there some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Do they get a promotion?
It's the old story where you come back and do good deeds or something like that. Or
right.
I'm
I think demons can be very, very competitive, even with each other. And they say, "Look at me! Look what I did!" Because oftentimes, at least in this book, it's very telling. The demons. One of the demons expresses that we are told who to possess. We are told what to do. We are following orders. But if we see an advantage, we'll jump to it too. But some of them are braggarts. Some demons they're braggarts, and they do want to see like how important I am and how I was able to handle this. Look at me, look at what I did. And so hopefully they're hoping to be rewarded in some ways, but still their existence is a terrible existence. And the worst thing that can be done to them is to be cast out of a home or out of a person. And yet, what do? Do they just live comfortably with this person? Often they try to destroy the host. And their nature is to destroy, to steal, kill, and destroy, as it says in the Bible. So they will do anything to advance themselves, so to speak, but they'll also, give themselves away by their very nature. It's like the story of the scorpion who was on the swan and asked, can you fly? We both need to get across this river. Can you fly me across? That way we'll help each other. And of course, the swan trusted the scorpion because they both die at the stung. They had almost waded to the other end, and all of a sudden the scorpion stung the swan, meaning certain death for both of them. And in its dying breath, the swan asked the scorpion, "Why did you do that? You've condemned us both. Why did you do that?" And the scorpion just answered, "It's what I do." And that's the end of the story. Right. It's their very nature.
Another interesting question comes from Sarah Youssef. Have you noticed any trends when encountering psychokinetic phenomena? How would you differentiate from entity-based versus a human agent? There's a lot. There's a lot to consider here. Yeah.
Right. But I look from personal experience. There was a boy that my brother and I, of course, dealt with years ago that was exhibiting all the signs of classic demonic possession, and the thing is that he could make things, or rather, it seemed like he wasn't doing it. It seemed the entity, because it was not just him doing things. He was getting hurt. He was being picked up, thrown down, slammed against the floor. And it didn't seem he was doing this to himself. And yet, even if that boy wasn't aware that you were close to him, he knew somehow. And it's almost like the demon was trying to, giving him information, warning him about things. But it came to a point where it just wasn't working anymore. We were overwhelming the situation. My brother and I and the other people who were assisting were overwhelming that particular entity. So what did that entity do? Well, the exorcist, it was a female exorcist, she herself became possessed. She fell down, and of course, this was a Santorian situation. I was told it would be a Catholic exorcism. It turned out to be Santorian. But the woman who was the boy's aunt suddenly collapsed into what appeared to be a grand mal seizure, but immediately sat up, smiling, with her eyes very narrow and serpentine and black, and asked for a cigar, smoking a cigar, and swaying, come around, I will tell your fortune, I will tell your fortune. So it was either the same spirit had gone into her, or it was two spirits working in conjunction with each other. So I think that was not just the boy himself causing furniture to move and temperature changes. I really think there was an external entity or external entities at play here working together. And that boy just went into a kind of a non-responsive daze while this was happening.
Right. The other thing I would mention, Sarah, in the case, and it doesn't necessarily happen often, but there are common denominators with poltergeist activity. If a human is an agent, there is usually a target. For example, if an adolescent is having a problem with the parents, then the parents' wedding picture will fall off the wall. Things will be broken in their room. So it doesn't happen that way all the time, but it seems that when one particular individual is a target of object manipulation, then that's where I would go to a human agent. So just my 2 cents. Let's move on to Shelley Cooper. I wonder if people are especially easy prey when sleeping. I assume in the beta state, Keith.
Yes, some people are. I believe that we are protected, especially if we pray before going to bed at night. That's the old prayer. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. But not necessarily if somebody expires, but pray for safety while sleeping. I believe we are psychologically vulnerable, but we have a shield of protection over us. Most of us do. Some are more vulnerable than others. I was dealing with a person last year who believed it was sexual dreams and sexual things were happening to him, but he was having more and more sexual dreams. However, it was the same entity, a female entity that didn't look completely human, that kept coming to him, mainly at the end of his dreams as he was in the beta state, as he was coming towards wakefulness. The spirit would appear to him and do all sexual connotations and everything like that. So it was having an effect on his physical body, all this sexual interaction, but he did believe it was a spirit coming to him. I did, go over and I did a total prayer session with him. I did a deliverance, not an exorcism, but I did a full deliverance session with him. The next night he was exactly the same. Nothing positive had happened. I suggested that he go and at least get physically checked out, get some treatment, get some intervention medically, which he refused to do. It's not that I disbelieved there was any spirits involved, but it was having such a physical effect. I was saying, please just, if anything, just rule that out. See if medications will help you. But he didn't want to go to that step.
So unique. You bring up both of those issues that this individual was dealing with because, number one, yes, on many occasions, especially at the beginning, I was waking up. I was saying the Lord's Prayer in my dream, and I was being rescued, in a sense, out of that sleep, and I would be waking up actually saying the Lord's Prayer in my sleep and then into my consciousness. It was really an incredible sensation of rescue. And then the other part, yes, some deviant sexual dreams that border on brutal, border on savage, and
wow,
again, not understanding other than the fact of again, looking for that chink in the armor, so to speak, that they've tried going after my family in these night terrors, going after the sexual part. I mean, having me, and I don't mean to turn everybody off by no means, and I know we got more questions, but in one part in time, having me crush a cat's head with a phone book. I mean, just tormenting thoughts coming from nowhere. So it's real, folks, to say the least. It certainly is. Ken, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Not a problem. Going back to this, Shelley Cooper, in the few minutes we have left, we'll try to get through these folks. Shelley asks, do you continue to stay in touch with people after you have helped them, Keith?
For the most part, yes. Yes, for the most part. I've been in touch with a lot of clients who I'm still in pretty much either bi-weekly or weekly conversations, just how you're doing and everything. It would get overwhelming to be in touch with everybody. Some you just lose touch with over the years, but there are clients that I do stay in regular touch, such as the family that is in Kentucky, of course. I stay in touch with them. Right. And, they're wonderful, wonderful people. And I lend what support and prayers I can to them. And there's a case I'm working on in Massachusetts where it's involving a family with a special needs child. And yes, I stay in weekly touch with them, and they can always tell me when they need prayer, when they need intercession. So that does help a lot to stay in touch with them. But yeah, sometimes just friendly conversations, staying in touch and wondering how they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, there are people sometimes in this field where you become friends beyond the paranormal. You know, you go out to dinner, they're just, you
Yes.
know, you just hit it off with people. So,
Mhm.
has Keith ever worked with Cody and Satori from Audrey Dawson?
Have I worked with Cody and Storage? I have been present when they
at Pain House.
Yes, yeah, the Pain House, the Pain House. I've certainly been present, and I've documented, and I haven't worked with them in that capacity, so to speak. But I've observed, and certainly Cody, I've mentored him in demonology and the spiritual aspects and everything like that. So we're all very close. What's that?
Since he was a youngin.
Oh yeah, since he was a youngin, and to me he still is a youngin. Because he'll always be a young one to me. But yeah, I've been close to them and been while they're working in their capacity, the way they do things, and if they ever needed assistance from me, of course I would be right there, and vice versa. I'm sure if I needed assistance from them, they'd be right there. But yeah, I've known Cody like you have, Ken, since he was very, very young, and I've known Satori since she came back from the hospital. when she was
right. I was going to say in the early days of Ghost Hunters.
Yes.
Satori was like 3 months old or something.
Exactly. 2 weeks old.
Yeah, for sure. Our friend Dave Fritz. Can loneliness, depression, separation cause a situation which is poltergeist infestation, which then turns into something demonic?
Yes, that is a possibility, and it has happened that way, where somebody is depressed and lonely, and they start fretting and go into like a terrible, terrible, deep clinical depression, and sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes an entity will pick on that, and that was, although it's a fictional story, it does have some reality in The Exorcist. Reagan Teresa McNeil is a depressed, she's very close to her mother, a loving child. She's 11 years old, but she has no friends because her mother's an actress, moves around place to place. Her father doesn't call her on her 12th birthday, which just eats the heart out of her. So she turns to an imaginary friend on the Ouija board, Howard. It's Uncle Howie, but her father's
Captain Howdy. Captain Howie.
Captain Howdy. And her father's name's Howard. So Captain Howdy kind of becomes that replacement. And she becomes so obsessed talking to her imaginary friend, that's the demon comes in and uses that weakness and steps right in, uses that vulnerability. That's an example that does have some basis in reality.
Keith, we are pretty much all out of time. I'm probably going to frustrate our producer, Bill Forte, but I want to take a minute to let you put out your information. If anybody is dealing with any type of situation that could deem to be demonic, or they want to know more about you, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to reach out to you, sir?
Go to nearparanormal.com. That's our website. And we're very accessible to find there. Just search Keith and Sandra Johnson. There's not going to be too many Keith and Sandra Johnsons that are into deliverance and demonology, so we're easy to find that way. And so we're out there, so we're pretty easy to contact.
Fantastic. As always, sir, it's a pleasure. Too far and few between our visits, and we're going to have you come back again here very, very soon. There's so many more questions, so many more things to address there, and I can't thank you enough for being here with us. And actually, Ken, why don't you take us out tonight?
All right. Well, Keith, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, yeah, it's been far too long, and we'll have to rectify that. But we will be back next week. Believe it or not, our calendar is clear. We shall return with another great set of guests, I believe. So,
Yeah.
mum's the word on that, but we'll see what's happening. So, on behalf of George Lopez, Keith Johnson, I'm Ken DaCosta. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Dead Air. Good night, all.
Take care.